My name is Diana Rowe, and I'm 33 years old. For the past 5 years, I've worked as a counselor in a small Ohio school teaching children how to stay hopeful when life gets hard. Ironically, I'm the one who's been running out of hope. My son, Noah, is 8. He used to spend hours building cardboard rockets and pretending he could reach the stars. Now he lies in a hospital bed, fighting a rare leukemia that's slowly stealing his light. The doctors said there's one last chance, an experimental therapy in Chicago. The cost? $91,700. That night, the snow was falling heavy when my parents came by. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd help. My father didn't even sit down. He just stood by the doorway and said quietly, "Diana, you need to be realistic. We can't drain our retirement for something uncertain." My mother's voice followed, soft but cold. "Sweetheart, we've already done so much for you. We helped before, remember? We just can't start over." I stood frozen, the air thick between us. "It's not starting over, Mom," I whispered. "It's Noah's life." They didn't answer. Just silence, the kind that fills a room when love runs out. And right there, in that silence, if you've ever asked for help and been told to be realistic, if you've ever had someone you love walk away when you needed them most, tap the like button. Not for me, but for every parent who's ever fought alone, and every child who still believes someone will show up. Outside, I watched their car pull away, the red taillights fading into the storm. Inside, Noah's oxygen monitor kept beeping softly, steady, fragile, like a heartbeat begging to be heard. I sank to the floor, the cold tile biting into my knees. "He's your grandson," I whispered, but no one answered. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the kind of sound that never cares if you break. That night, I learned something no parent should ever have to learn. Love can have limits, and family can close a door while you're still standing in the snow. The snow outside had turned to slush by the time my parents stopped calling. A few weeks passed, and silence became the new normal. I spent my evenings at the hospital, grading papers beside Noah's bed, pretending everything was fine. Then one night, as I was leaving the oncology ward, my phone rang. It was Claire, my younger sister. Her voice was bright, the kind of happiness that doesn't ask if you're ready to hear it. "Diana!" "You won't believe it, I'm engaged," Ethan proposed. Her words felt like sunlight stabbing into a dark room. "That's wonderful, Claire," I managed, though my throat tightened. "It's going to be huge. Mom and Dad are covering everything, the venue, the dress, even the destination. They said no budget limits. Can you imagine? We're thinking Italy. Maybe Lake Como." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, as if holding it closer could make the words sound different. "No budget limits?" "None," Mom said. "It's my little girl's once-in-a-lifetime day." "Oh, and you'll be my maid of honor, right? I'll send the dress info soon." The line buzzed in my ear while my world tilted. In the next room, Noah was coughing softly in his sleep. The oxygen machine hissed like a whisper of truth. They had the money, they just chose not to use it for him. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. For months, I'd believed they refused because they couldn't, but now, I knew they wouldn't. Over the next few weeks, every family call became a small performance about Claire's wedding, the designer gown, the imported flowers, the tasting in Napa Valley. Mom would gush through the phone. "You should see the venue, Diana. It's breathtaking. The deposit alone was $30,000, but worth every penny. Every penny." The same words she'd used when turning away from Noah's life. At first, I tried to be happy for them. I even smiled when I saw Claire's engagement post, her hand wrapped around a ring that probably cost more than a year of my rent. But the smile cracked quickly, because all I could see was Noah's IV drip and how it cost less than her bouquet. The following month, Mom called again. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about bridesmaid dresses. Claire found the perfect ones, only $300 each. You'll love the color. A soft champagne tone, $300. That was nearly the cost of 1 week of Noah's medication. I swallowed hard. "Mom, I don't think I can afford that right now." Silence. Then that familiar tone, the one she used when disappointment turned into judgment. "Diana, it's your sister's wedding. You can't make everything about Noah all the time." I closed my eyes. Her words cut deeper than she realized. Make everything about Noah? He was my son, and he was dying. If I didn't make everything about him, who would? "Can I think about it?" I asked. "You'd better decide soon," she said briskly. "The fittings are next week." When the call ended, I just sat there in the dark, staring at my reflection in the hospital window. Behind the glass, I looked like a ghost of myself, pale, tired, fading. And behind me, my son slept under the soft hum of machines that kept him here a little longer. Outside, the world was moving on: parties, cakes, dresses, champagne toasts. Inside this room, I was measuring hope by the ounce. A few days later, Dad texted a photo from a wedding tasting, rows of crystal glasses, candles floating in imported marble bowls. The caption read, "Isn't it beautiful?" I almost replied, "Yes, beautiful enough to bury the truth under all that glitter." But I didn't. Because I finally understood something deeper than anger, something colder. They weren't just careless. They were comfortable. And comfort doesn't look back. So I said nothing. I just stood beside Noah's bed that night, holding his hand, listening to the machines breathe for him. And in that quiet, I promised myself if the day ever came when comfort turned to desperation, I would remember this moment, every detail, every word, every silence they gave me. The winter melted into spring, but nothing changed for Noah. Every day felt borrowed, a fragile gift wrapped in wires and quiet prayers. The doctors tried to sound hopeful, but I could hear it in their voices. They were running out of ways to say, "We're sorry." By April, I had sold almost everything: the piano my grandmother left me, my wedding ring, even my car. We moved into a small studio near the hospital so I could be closer to him. I slept in a fold-out chair, listening to the beeping of machines that had become our lullaby. Meanwhile, Claire's wedding updates filled my phone like confetti. Photos of Tuscany vineyards, designer invitations, the lace dress imported from Paris. Mom's messages always ended the same way. "You should be happy for her, Diana. It's the best time of her life." I wanted to type back, "My son is running out of life, but what would be the point?" They wouldn't understand. By early June, Noah's condition worsened. Dr. Patel, the kind man who'd been with us since the diagnosis, pulled me aside after rounds. "His white cell count isn't responding anymore," he said softly. "You should focus on keeping him comfortable." Comfortable. The word stung. How do you make a dying child comfortable? That night, I held Noah's hand and told him stories about space, his favorite. He whispered, "Mom, when I go to heaven, do you think they'll let me keep my telescope?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I think they'll build you a bigger one," I said. "One that can see everything." He smiled, small and tired. "Then I'll look for you." The next morning, I called my parents again, maybe just to hear their voices. When Dad picked up, I could hear laughter in the background, music, the sound of glasses clinking. "Dad, it's getting worse. The doctor said we might only have weeks." A pause, then his voice distracted. "We're at Claire's tasting event, honey. Can we talk later?" And just like that, I knew I'd lost more than my son. I'd lost my family too. 2 weeks later, Noah's breathing became shallow. His small chest rose and fell like a tired wave. The nurses rushed in when the alarm started. I stood frozen, gripping the rails of his bed as they worked, words flying, machines screaming. Then, silence. The kind that splits the world in half. When they told me he was gone, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just held him, the way I used to when he was a baby, and whispered, "You can rest now, sweetheart. You don't have to be strong anymore." The hospital room felt impossibly quiet, the kind of quiet you can't escape. I called my mother. My voice barely worked. "Mom, Noah's gone." A pause then, her answer, soft and distant. "Oh, Diana, What terrible timing. Timing? I repeated, not understanding. The rehearsal dinner is this Friday. The wedding's on Sunday. We'll figure something out. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard her. But no, she meant it. Terrible timing. Because her grandson's death was inconvenient. That night, I sat beside Noah's empty bed, staring at the small imprint his body had left on the sheets. Grief comes in waves, they say, but mine felt like drowning, and the people who were supposed to throw me a rope were too busy picking flowers and booking string quartets. The funeral home asked when I wanted to schedule the service. I said Friday. Mom called the next morning. "Sweetheart, Friday's really difficult. We have the rehearsal that day and the dinner in the evening. Could you maybe move it to Thursday?" I stared at the wall, numb. "You want me to move my son's funeral?" "Just to make it easier for everyone," she said gently, as if that made it kind. "You know how important this weekend is for Claire." I didn't reply. I just hung up. Then I went ahead and planned the funeral myself. It was small, 20 people at most. My friend Linda from work brought flowers. My principal came, holding a casserole dish like it was an offering. My parents arrived 40 minutes late, dressed in coordinated beige outfits that looked more suited for a reception than a burial. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, her mascara perfect. Dad checked his watch twice. When the service ended, they hugged me quickly. "We're so proud of how strong you've been," Dad said. "Claire's having a little crisis with the seating chart, so we should go." I watched their car drive away, the dust from the road rising behind them, and for the first time I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. I just felt nothing. That's the thing about losing everything, the heart eventually goes quiet. But inside that silence, something else started growing, not hatred, not revenge, but something colder, clearer, a promise. By December, the world had moved on. The snow returned, the lights came up in every window, and Christmas songs played in stores like grief was just a thing people outgrew. For me, time didn't move. It just circled. Every night, I still caught myself setting a place for Noah at the table, still waking to reach for him before remembering the bed was empty. Then, one afternoon, my mother called. Her voice was gentle, too gentle, the kind that comes right before another wound. "Sweetheart, your father and I were wondering if you'd like to come for Christmas dinner. Claire and Ethan will be there. It's been such a hard year. We'd love to have you home." The word didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. Still, something inside me whispered, "Go." Maybe I needed to see them to see if I could forgive, or at least understand. When I arrived, their house looked like a magazine cover. A 12-foot tree trimmed in gold, garlands on every stair, and the smell of catered food instead of anything cooked by love. Mom rushed to hug me, perfume thick and floral. "Oh, Diana, you look so thin. You're working too much again, aren't you?" I smiled faintly. Something like that. At the table, Claire and her husband Ethan were already seated, both glowing with the kind of ease that only comes from being untouched by pain. They talked about their honeymoon in Santorini, about their new house in Denver, about everything except the one name that filled the room like a ghost, Noah. Between the laughter and the sound of silverware, my father poured himself another glass of wine. "You've been quiet, Diana," he said. "How's work?" "Busy," I replied. "It helps." "That's good. Keeping busy is the best cure, the best cure." I stared at my plate: lobster tail, mashed potatoes, a drizzle of something expensive. All I could think was how much this meal must have cost, how many doses of chemo it could have bought. Claire leaned forward, voice soft but careful. "You know, Diana, you should really think about moving somewhere else." A fresh start. "There are too many sad memories here," I met her eyes. "A fresh start?" "Yes. Denver's beautiful. We could help you find something small. You'd love it small." That word landed like an insult disguised as kindness. She didn't mean a home, she meant a way to forget. Then my father cleared his throat. "We've been thinking, honey. With everything that's happened, maybe you should consider bankruptcy. It's the responsible thing. Wipe the slate clean. Bankruptcy, I repeated. For your medical debt, he continued. You'll never pay it off on a teacher's salary. Start over, Mom added. It's what Noah would want. I set my fork down carefully. The silver hit the plate with a sound that silenced the room. You know what would have helped me start over? I said softly. $91,700? That's all it would have taken. My mother froze. Claire glanced at her husband, her smile slipping. Dad's jaw tightened. We've been over this, Diana. No, I said. You avoided it. There's a difference, I stood, the candlelight catching the edge of my face. You spent $281,000 on a wedding. A single day. More than triple what could have saved your grandson's life. It wasn't guaranteed, Dad snapped. We weren't going to throw that kind of money away on something uncertain. But you threw it away on wine and fireworks, I shot back. You threw it away so Claire could have the perfect sunset ceremony while your grandson was dying. My mother's voice trembled. That's not fair. We did what we thought was right. We couldn't save him, Diana. You didn't even try. The words came out colder than I meant them, but they were true. You had the money. You had the chance. You just didn't have the heart. Claire stood abruptly. You're being cruel. You're punishing us because your life fell apart. That's not our fault, I turned to her, calm now, almost detached. You're right. It's not your fault, it's theirs. But someday, when you have a child and that child needs help and the people you trust turn away, you'll understand what it means to stand alone in the snow. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. My father's face turned red. That's enough. If you can't be respectful, you can leave. I nodded slowly. You're right. I should have left a long time ago. I picked up my coat from the chair. As I walked toward the door, I heard my mother's voice behind me breaking, almost pleading. Diana, please. It's Christmas, I paused, hand on the doorknob. No, Mom. Christmas ended the day you told me to move my son's funeral, and then I stepped out into the cold December night. The wind bit at my face, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. Behind me, laughter resumed. Forced and nervous, the sound of people patching over guilt with noise. I stood beside my car, looking at their glowing windows, warm, golden, and hollow. Then I whispered, Merry Christmas, Noah. They'll never understand what real love costs. The snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, covering the footprints I left on their perfect driveway, as if erasing the last trace of the daughter they once had. 4 years passed, 4 long, quiet years that felt like both a lifetime and a breath. I moved to a different town, closer to Lake Erie, and started over. At first, it was just survival teaching part-time, counseling on weekends, volunteering at the hospice where Noah used to smile at the nurses. But grief has a strange way of turning pain into purpose. I began helping other parents, the ones drowning in medical debt, the ones sitting by hospital beds with trembling hands and tired hope. People said I looked stronger. The truth was, I just learned how to live with the ache instead of trying to escape it. Then one afternoon, my phone rang a number I hadn't seen in years. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me whispered, "Pick up." Diana? It was Mom. Her voice sounded smaller, thinner, the sound of someone who'd been carrying shame for too long. Your father and we're in trouble. I didn't respond right away. We lost the business, she continued. Your father's investments went bad. The house, we might lose it too. We're behind on payment silence. We need about $95,000 to keep the bank from taking it. We thought maybe I could help? I finished for her. You've done so well for yourself, she said quickly. Everyone says you're respected now. You've rebuilt your life and we're proud of that. Proud. That word used to mean something. Now it just sounded like a memory of what love was supposed to be. I looked out the window. The lake was calm, dark, endless, like the quiet between us. You know, I said slowly, 95,000 isn't that far from 91,700. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear her breathing, the realization hitting her like cold wind. Diana, please. We were wrong. We didn't know. You knew, I said gently. You just didn't care enough to choose differently. Tears came then, not mine, but hers, and for a brief second I almost felt sorry. Almost. Please, she whispered, don't let us lose everything. I closed my eyes. Everything? I repeated softly. You already did. I hung up the phone and sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall again, slow and steady, the same as it had that night they walked away from my door. Except this time, I wasn't the one left standing in the cold. A week later, I drove back to the town I'd promised never to see again. The houses looked smaller, the streets colder, or maybe I'd just outgrown the version of me who used to beg at those doors. My parents were waiting outside their porch, wrapped in coats that couldn't hide the weight of regret. Dad spoke first. Diana, thank you for coming. Mom's eyes were puffy, her voice shaking. We didn't know where else to turn. I didn't rush to comfort them, not this time. How much did you say you needed? 95,000, Dad said quickly. The bank's about to take the house. I reached into my bag, placed a white envelope on the table. That's a cashier's check for 95,000. Mom gasped. Oh, sweetheart, thank you. You don't know what this means. I do, I said, because I once needed that exact kind of help. And you turned away? Their faces fell the truth, landing heavier than the money ever could. I slid another envelope forward. Before you take it, sign this. Dad frowned. What is it? The truth, I said quietly. That when your grandson needed you, you chose a wedding over a life. You'll sign it, and you'll keep your house but not your silence. Mom began to cry. Diana, please. No, I interrupted softly. You don't get to cry for him now. I already did that for both of us. They hesitated, then signed, hands trembling, eyes lowered. When the ink dried, I handed them the check. You can keep your roof, I said, but I'll keep my peace. Outside, the snow fell again, slow, steady, almost merciful. I drove straight to the cemetery, parked beneath the same oak tree where Noah used to chase leaves. I knelt beside his stone, placed the signed confession against the marble, and whispered, You see, baby? Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just arrives. Quietly. Then I looked up at the sky, where flakes drifted like forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken, and for the first time in years, I exhaled without shaking. If you believe family should mean love, not convenience, if you've ever been left behind but found your strength anyway, hit the like button to keep stories like this alive. Subscribe if you believe every act of kindness still matters, even when no one's watching. And share this family story, because somewhere out there, another heart needs to know it's not alone. Because justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes, it comes with truth.